folks, welcome back. Episode 16 of the Black Eagles podcast. Sinan Schwarting, live from New York City, live directly post-match. We are recording post-haste as quick as possible after the match against LASK. I don't know if it's a dark day or what you'd call it, but of course, with me again, as always, is co-host Kaan Bayazit. What do you say, guy?
You make it sound like hi everyone. You make it sound as if we lost or something. People who didn't watch the game are gonna be like, oh my god, no, did they lose at home? What? No,
I assume if you're tuned into a Beşiktaş podcast, you know the result. And I'm responding. In fact, I'm opposed to this. I don't consider it a dark day. We're gonna get into it. We're jumping right in. But I am responding to the general tone of Beşiktaş Twitter, to our group chat, among our editorial board. There does seem to be a sort of doomsday feel to people's reactions today, and so I'm poking fun at that.
Yeah, I know. But of course, we had to give people some insight here.
For sure, yeah. It was a victory, guys. Yeah, we won 1-0. Didn't allow any goals on the, at home. We didn't concede any away goals. So, in fact, right?
Yeah, it's positive, exactly. I mean, yeah, not conceding an away goal is key in European matches. The scoreline 1-0. It's not a disadvantage heading into the return game. I mean, there's no negatives to it, except for the fact that you didn't expand your lead. Yeah. I mean, if you watch the game, and if you see the chances that Beşiktaş had, there weren't like 6, 7, 8 chances. We hit the bar twice, and I think there were 2 big chances for Ozan. So I think those 4 chances, we should have scored at least 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, for sure.
But unfortunately, we didn't. I think a 2-0 would have been so much more comfortable heading into the return game. I mean, yeah, that's just me being captain. Obviously, that'd be much more comfortable.
Maybe even 3.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, we're at it.
Yeah. Let's cut acting like the football professors here. Obviously, 2-0, 3-0 would have been better. But with our qualities, I think that we should be able to secure qualification come next Thursday with a 1-0 lead heading into that game. Yeah. I think as soon as Beşiktaş score an away goal, the tie is over. The match also changes. I mean, the way that the match is going to go, because you have to keep in mind, for people who watched the game and also for people who didn't watch the game, LASK came here to defend. LASK came here very well organized. Yeah. They didn't just come to defend. They tried to hit us on the counter a few times. I think there were 2 attacks that were really good. There was that one really nice shot from the edge of the area from Holland, and there was that one other attempt in the second half, because the Holland attempt was in the first half. In the second half, there was one that Tolga had to parry out into corner. Mm-hmm. Those 2 were good opportunities for them. Yeah. And you know what? In Europe, that sometimes is enough. You just need that 1 or those 2 chances, and then you need to convert that. And if you get that away goal, you have a huge advantage heading into your home game. But they didn't get that away goal. And if you didn't watch this game, it's not like they had a lot of chances. No. That's literally what they had.
But they had those 2 moments.
It, yeah. Yeah, and that's what they should have taken those moments. They didn't.
Yeah. No, I corroborate everything you said. I co-sign all of that. But Kaan, now, all right. Now let's streamline this. All right, let's do a quick, tell me, for you, what is the highlight and the low light? And it can be a performer, or it could be an element of the game, or an aspect of it. For you, what is your highlight?
Highlight for me again was Jermaine Lens. In the past 2 games, I thought Lens was excellent again today. There's something about that later I want to go into a little bit more deeper. But for me, Lens was good again. Another highlight, I think, the slow resurgence of Ozan Özyakup. He got an assist today. He got into position for 2 good chances. Yeah, he didn't score, he didn't convert, but he was there. That's important. Those are the first telltale signs of him hopefully having a good season. I liked Tolga in the first half, but I didn't like him in the second half as much. Plus, I really don't think that. It's fine for a few, if you do it once in a while to have a tall guy, Oğuzhan Medel midfield, but I think generally that's not going to work. It's going to have to be either Oğuzhan or Tolga, not both of them at the same time. For me, that just doesn't work. I want to see a more attacking, more creative player in that 10 role, which Oğuzhan was playing in tonight, and I want to see Oğuzhan in that 8 role that Tolga was playing in. Because I think that's his best role. And then negatively, Tolga was, every time he hit the ball with his feet, it went to the opposition. But we know that. We know we need a goalkeeper. So I'm not going, I pointed it out, but let's not ponder too much on that because it's stuff we all know.
On a day like today where the defense may have been a sort of general strength, I don't want to pick on any, even Tolga, who clearly stood out as not being good enough, but also didn't do any of his normal boneheaded stuff that we could let's save that criticism for when he probably merits it, if in fact he gets the opportunity to.
He had one really poor clearance where he shot it to the opposition and they almost got an opportunity out of it. So that was already, for me, I hope people in charge were watching that and they were like, okay, he hasn't forgotten how to do that. Let's make post-haste work of that transfer for the goalkeeper position.
We'll have more news on that, by the way. Stay tuned.
Yes, exactly. Stay tuned. But otherwise, for me, kind of a letdown. Again, Kyle Larin. Last week, hat-trick against Tórshavn at home, but in Tórshavn, I wasn't too impressed with him. And today, I don't know. Just felt like he faded away a little bit. Had a few moments where he won the ball, but then felt like the follow-up wasn't great. Didn't really hold on to it too well. And those were all kind of criticisms he was already getting in the MLS. But I think the European level, because it's not because this is a team from Austria that it's not a decent level. I mean, for me, as soon as you start entering that 12, 13, 14, 15 position on the UEFA coefficient ranking, in terms of league status, which Austria are in around that range, I would imagine, you start getting decent enough teams. And I think we saw that with LASK today, that organization-wise, they were definitely above average. And I think that they definitely had some interesting, talented players. I really like that Holland guy, for example. But for me, Larin was a little bit of a disappointment again, a little bit of a letdown, and maybe he still has to come into his own a little bit more. He has to play more games, but to me, it does kind of feel like a clear sign that we're going to need another striker. Because I think even if you do give Larin the nod and you're going to go into the season with him as number 1. You have to have a contingency plan if he doesn't work out.
No,
you know what I mean?
Those are good highlights and lowlights. It's hard for me to really. Yeah, I don't have much to add besides, Larin, despite me sort of being happy that he had contributed that hat trick, and I think I gave him a highlight last match. I did put an asterisk on it in that it wasn't a flawless performance. I liked that he might have gained the confidence to start putting them in the back of the net. And so today definitely represents a step backwards in that regard. And maybe,
he wasn't presented with the chances, of course. So, I mean.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to get to, which is that, in general, I think our approach was lacking. And for me, that highlights very much the need for a number 10. I'm not going to use my highlights or lowlights for that point in and of itself, but clearly we're missing that piece. So I mean, as far as my highlight is concerned, you've already said Lenz, so I don't want to like double up on it. He was definitely a highlight though, and he has continued to be. But I'm going to say more on that in a moment. So what I will say for our highlight is that our back line, in particular Pepe and Nedje, who actually even came through with some nice sort of acrobatic. I don't know if you recall, there was one very acrobatic clearance he made that was somewhat impressive, honestly.
All I
held up
recall
well.
is Pepe kicking the crap out of that Tete guy.
Well, and that Tete guy had clearly been an aggravating nuisance and doing some sort of chippy, dirty little things that you could see it culminating, and I think when it really blew up was he had I think it was against Tolga. There was some contact that you could see Pepe was like irate about, and from that moment on, I think you had actually called it out that was coming, but beyond that sort of those antics.
Yeah, that was after the elbow,
like
the elbow. He claimed he got like hit in the face, and he claimed it was an elbow from Tete. And after that, I was like, okay, he's not giving up on that. He's going to kick the shit out of him later.
This is not going to end well. No, and he did get a hand to the face or something that looked pretty brutal. But anyway. Beyond those antics, I did think that they held up quite well back there. They didn't allow for too much of a scare, and the opportunities that LASK had were not in the back there. They were kind of in approach, taking shots from a bit of distance that you can't necessarily pin on the central defenders. So, all in all, I thought they've held up well, and throughout the preseason, actually, right? We haven't allowed a goal. Is that correct in competitive play?
Well, in competitive play, no. We only had those 3 games, of course, against the 2 against Torshavn and then this one. So
we didn't let up a dumb goal against Torshavn, did we? I know we have in the preseason let up quite a few.
Yeah. But of course, I mean, in the preseason we didn't have Pepe, we didn't have Vida, we didn't have Enzo Rocco, who didn't get a chance.
And it was when we were really digging deep. Like I remember against Reading, we literally changed the entire side, and then they scored 2 goals. It was like we were playing with Arras, was Villas, and anyway. So, I'm going to give the defense their due. I don't think people do that enough in general.
Yeah.
Not Toga, not the keeper there. As we mentioned, he had some glaring deficiencies.
You do get the feeling that the rest of the team kind of is nervous about him being in goal.
Oh yeah, big time.
And that's not a good thing.
No, you don't want that in your starting keeper. And hopefully they could sense that from above, because it was quite clear for, I think, most of us. But anyway, moving on. My low light, also not going to pick on him to that extent. My low light, I'm going to give it to Chanel Gunesh. I thought he was slow to react. His first sub came late. I thought even by the 60th. So. Yeah, I thought by the, shortly after the second half began, it was clear that we were not coming with the same energy we had in the first half. And that energy in the first half had already been flagging. And so where Tolga had been somewhat impressive and brought some energy and verve, I thought, in the first half, and I joked about this, although I kind of gave him some credit in our group chat. I said, LOL guy is back. I want to take credit for that. That's a good one.
I didn't see that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Come on. I was like, where are the other dads around here? That was a grade A dad joke.
I was watching the game. Sorry, man, missed it.
I guess that's a good excuse. But yeah, indeed, he was flagging. Everyone was. And Babel came under a lot of criticism. I actually think that that's unfair, and I think that's part of the sort of general agenda a lot of fans have had against him this whole preseason.
Yeah,
he scored, and it was actually a fairly nice goal. And
good run.
And he had energy in the first half. Except certainly there were parts where I felt like he must have been tired. He seemed like almost drunk, like he was like woozy. Like he was holding the ball, and he seemed sort of disoriented, like.
Babel's play style consumes a lot of energy, and people just expect him to dash like 90 minutes. That's very difficult if you do a 40-50 meter sprint a few times in a match. If you manage to do that like 5 times in a game, that's
You're
quite a
doing
lot.
good. Yeah. No, and I wonder if maybe if it was very hot, down on the pitch or something, because like he seemed, like I said, almost kind of woozy at points.
Gassed.
But yeah, but nonetheless, he scored, and I don't think anyone should single him out in a sort of negative light in particular. The one element, though, going back to my giving Chanel Gunesh the low light, was that he clearly was gassed, and by, I'd say, like the 55th minute even, we could have said, pull him out and put Quaresma out there to give us some energy in the attack, which is exactly the role you'd want from him in that super sub role anyway. Maybe it's a little early for him given his time with us in the preseason and all, but I mean, he has just come off the World Cup, so I mean, he shouldn't be that out of form. I don't know. That seemed like a mistake for me. He should have taken our bubble and left Lenz out. Sure, Lenz also did show some signs of fleeting energy, but certainly not to the extent that he'd be the first one you'd take out among those two. That seemed a very odd thing to do. Laren also seemed to be cold, very obviously, or at least like not bringing the type of energy you'd need him to in terms of coming back and mixing himself up in the play, since he obviously wasn't getting the ball brought to him. So I thought maybe that could have been a sub that you'd make. Maybe in the 55th minute you kind of give two guys a good solid lecture about what you want them to tell guys around them, and you make 2 subs there just to change the outlook of the game, because we clearly, it seems we needed a different energy that had not transmitted in the halftime talk clearly.
Yeah.
I thought his subs were late and they were not the correct subs. And at the end of the game, we have Negredo and Love in at the same time, kind of fooling around. Like there was one clear goal that the two of them were flubbing around next to the goal post. That was a shame.
I felt like Love was kind of hindering. I think that Negredo was in a better position there to slot that home. I think he would have netted that, and I think if Love wouldn't have been there, or they would have communicated better, I think that would have been a 100% goal. Love kind of hindering Negredo there and hitting the post. Yeah. That should have been the 2-0 for sure, or the 3-0.
And that was clumsy, and I thought like seeing Negredo and Love in that sort of bungling role together next to it was almost like a perfect. I hope there's an image of it that's like well taken. It'd be a perfect sort of like metaphor for
there's a couple
the preseason, right?
Of those things
and I'd say this because like I think our preseason, it's basically those two figures who have hindered it the most. A lot of the moves we haven't been able to make because we have to get rid of one of those two, and especially Negredo's huge salary. So those are 2 big anchors, essentially, that have sort of loomed over us this whole preseason. Not to be too dramatic about it, but so that was a bummer. Ozan also, like, you gave him the pass, but I think I would have loved if he'd put one of those 2 opportunities away. They were real, particularly the header, like I don't really... I mean, whatever. He's excited. You're absolutely right. Like he was getting into positions in better form
toward ground. If he,
clear.
If he had headed it toward ground, probably would have been a goal. Although I have to say the goalkeeper was up quick.
Yeah,
and,
he did.
Might have gotten
well.
it, but if you had those types of balls, if you had them towards the ground, you're going to score 9 times out of 10, I think.
Yeah, and Ozan probably knows that, and I'm sure he wishes he could take it back all over again, but. Anyway, you certainly can't harp on him, but I think it's also a testament to the fact that Ozan has always been a sort of, I think, and I've mentioned this before, he needs to be embedded. He needs to be comfortable in a position, getting consistent burn there. I think his spotty playing time, even when healthy at some points last season, it's all a testament to that. I think he needs to be comfortable in his role in the starting lineup, and like you said, I think we absolutely like I mentioned to conjoin our previous points, we need a number 10 so that we can only have to play one of those two central midfielders between Tolga and Ozan. And it should absolutely be Ozan because he always historically has played better with a number 10 that can distribute the ball and that can go out wide and let him sort of make runs into the middle. And I think once we have, like, that's literally the linchpin. And so before we hit the panic button and like start basically like booking tickets for the fourth place, competition, let's just relax and recognize that the pieces we need are not vast. We need a keeper, we need a number 10, and we need a striker. Like, preeminently, specifically, those are the things we need the most. And it's not like that unrealistic that we're going to not be able to get those. Like, I think we just need to calm down as far as seeing so many negatives in the game, in the match today. Like, all of these things, Ozan's going to start putting those shots away once he starts feeling settled. Even Larin, I think, could probably find some consistency in his game if we really need him to. Although I do think there's no way it happens if we don't get a number 10. Fundamentally, that's going to make or break my perception of all this. Do we get that linchpin, essentially, that we need to connect our offense?
Yeah, and to tie into what I said about Larin earlier, I do want to add to that, because you just kind of referred to him as well. We did have lots of matches like that last season where Cenk was on an island and was not involved in the game at all.
Mm-hmm.
We've had games where Mario Gomez less so, because we did play a different sort of football back then. There was much more combination football back then. So, but even I'm sure we had games with Mario where we felt that he was on an island, stuck on an island.
Sure.
When Abubakar was playing up front alone instead of Cenk, we had those types of games.
Yeah.
And maybe that was one of those nights today where Larin just kind of was stuck on an island a little bit.
For sure. I mean, especially without that 10, without that kind of connector.
Yeah.
It's all the more glaring.
I want to see this team function with a proper creative midfield. Well, I mean, Ozan's probably going to be that deep playing playmaker, but I want to see an additional creative player added to that team.
Well, because that almost unlocks Ozan's creativity also,
Yes,
he needs to feed off of that, I think.
And he's better from, that deep playing playmaker role. And I just want to, I don't want to pass too much judgment without that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I feel about the whole team, honestly, about every aspect of the squad right now. I'm not even, like I said, I'm not even ready to start. I'll use the beeper here, but I'm not ready to start on Larin yet because of that same element. Like, if there's someone there who shows the ability to distribute him the ball in places where he can score and he's not scoring, then I'm going to say, we need Larin, loan him out. Let's get someone in there. But that's just not happening. I don't think anyone
should shit on him regardless. I mean, it's just this is kind of, he was there last season for a bit, but this is pretty much his debut European season. He needs time to settle, and he plus, we've been saying, that creative 10, for example, it doesn't have to be a Sergen type, like a maestro, but it has to be someone that's dynamic, that is very involved in attacks. It has to be someone like that. Now, I think Channel Ganesh wants to move back to that sort of system that we had with Sosa. But you have to keep in mind, as long as we don't have a replacement there, we're still stuck to playing either Tolgay or kind of Ozan in that role, neither of which do that very well. We don't have Talisca anymore, who offers that extra body in the box, who can benefit from room created by the striker or vice versa. So it's difficult really to judge the striker too heavily, I guess. And we have to see Larin first with a proper 10 to fully judge if he's ready or not.
Absolutely.
But if people are betting on him, I think people are being short-sighted because there's no point in on a 23-year-old striker that's only been in Europe for 6 months and is accustomed to the level of the MLS.
And who's played like 8 games for us in total and already scored 2 hat tricks. Let's just calm down.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 8 goals in 8 games now or something.
Yeah,
so
let's please relax, everybody. And again, we just came off a 1-0 victory, holding our opponent scoreless going into the away match. Where we literally, like you said, we have to score 1 goal and it's basically done. And I'm sure our upcoming match against Akhisar is gonna steal us a little more, for better or worse. Whether we win or lose, it's gonna give us more direction, more cohesion.
Yeah. It's a must-win match. It doesn't really matter if it's pretty or not, but we have to get off on a good start. If Beşiktaş already dropped points in that game, first home game at home, then people can start complaining.
Yeah.
But as long as we win that match, doesn't matter if it's with pretty football or ugly football. At this point in the season, it's early in the season, you can't expect the team to be functioning at 100% yet, especially if you still have some gaping holes that you need to fill with important transfers. It's going to take a couple more weeks before we're firing on all cylinders.
Really?
So at this point, the only important thing is in Europe, it's keeping a 0 and winning. And in the league, it's winning. You don't have to keep a 0, but just win that match.
Yeah.
If we beat Akhisar, it doesn't matter how we beat them. Of course, you don't want to beat them like with BS penalty or something. But as long as you beat them on your own merit, and you don't have to play the best game, but if you win that game, it's all good. And then there's just you talked about Lens as well, and you talked about Şenol Güneş and kind of him taking Lens off instead of Babel. But one more thing I don't think you mentioned is, this was, and I thought about adding it to my minus, but I didn't because I wanted to go into it. The thing there is, for me, he took Lens off against Tórshavn early in the second half while last week when I thought he was the best man on the pitch, and I thought it was fine. The match was played. Lens had already given 2 assists, had given his calling card. It's all good. You take him off, take your man on the match off, no problem. But today, for me, taking him off was a little bit of a statement on Şenol Güneş's part. To me, that came across as you're still the third choice winger. I'm taking you off instead of taking Babel off because Babel is my number 2 or my number 1, however you want to see it, and Quaresma is my number 2 and my number 1. Those 2 guys are my main guys, and you're going to be the backup. That is the exact thing he did last year, and that is exactly why, in my opinion, Lens had a year last year because he didn't feel the coach has confidence in him. And to me, that just felt like the entire preseason where he's been working hard and doing well, and these 3 matches in which he's played really well. It just felt kind of like a slap in the face. Like I really hope that I'm wrong and that against Akhisar Lens starts and that next week in Linz he starts.
I agree. I think he will because I think also we've seen that Quaresma is fairly cold.
Okay, but let's say that Quaresma in 2 weeks is ready and 100% fit, and then and despite the fact that Lens is playing good, he benches him for Quaresma while Babel is playing so-so. I'm not one of those Babel haters that says he's playing shit and all that stuff. I'm really not. But to me, there's a clear difference. Lens is playing at a very high level
more
right
energy,
now.
More desire.
Lens right now is a 7.5 or maybe even an 8, whereas Babel is like a 6.5.
For sure.
Right now.
I actually have, and I have a good. I don't know if it's necessarily a argument to what you're saying, but perhaps, if we're talking about like 4-dimensional chess here, right? Perhaps the signal is from Şenol Güneş is like, keep fighting. I think it'd be hard for anyone who's watching. I want
to believe you.
But
I know.
I agree. No, I agree. No, I'm playing devil's advocate here, only insofar as if he keeps playing.
Sorry. I feel like I know him. I don't know what he's thinking, of course. Sorry, I just
Of
had to
course,
interject that because that kind of made me sound a little bit.
No. In playing devil's advocate though, and I think even if Şenol Güneş isn't doing this intentionally, I think that the message that could be taken by Jermaine Lens is, like, we all see it. I'm sure he recognizes it himself. He's playing well. He's our best winger at the moment. So within that, by taking him off and by maybe giving him the drive to sort of keep, all right, like if that, he has, like you said, probably I'd say 2 weeks or so before Quaresma's fully match fit and like takes a starting role to set himself clearly above the mark there. And thus far, as you said, no, there's no denying that he's playing better than Babel, which is not a slight on Babel. Babel, I'd even say he's like better than Soso. He's been pretty good, not great by any stretch, but he's doing what's been required, scoring, etc. I have no problem with a Babel Lens starting rotation on the wings with Quaresma becoming the super sub. I mean, at some point we have to recognize as Beşiktaş fans, given Quaresma's age, that's going to be the role that Quaresma is going to be sort of easing into at some point, whether it's now or later in the season or maybe next season, whatever that may be. And at this juncture, I'm actually, of all the things going on with the team right now, I have no qualms with what's happening on our wings. I really think, just like we're saying we can't necessarily judge Ozan, we can't necessarily judge Larin, even the guys on the wings, right? They're overcompensating for that lack of a number 10 by coming in far too often and doing silly things. Babel's trying to hold the ball, and that's with the number 10, that's not going to be something that he's going to be required to do at all. And so then it's going to be on him if he does it. But I
think that's Quaresma morphing into a super sub somewhere down the line. I think that's also, like you said, that's also important. If you have a good 10 that makes the rest of your team function well, then you rely less on Quaresma's excellent crossing ability. And because Quaresma still has that. He's still an amazing crosser, world class even. But he doesn't have that pace that Lens has anymore. At one point in his career, Quaresma was very fast. Now he's just quick. The difference is he's very quick to turn away from his opponent. He's quick on in like a short amount of room. But for example, you see it a lot on counterattacks. When he gets the ball, it's easier for a defender to get back. If Lens gets the ball on a counterattack where there's lots of space in between the halfway line and the keeper, with nobody in front of him, Lens is gone. Quaresma you can still get. You can still get him back, if you know what I mean. And that's something that has to do with his age.
Sure. But Lens has those burners for sure.
Yeah, and what I've often noticed with Quaresma, something that he definitely lacks in games where we do get those counter opportunities late in a game. He usually doesn't have that in him anymore to make that run, whereas I can see a Lens coming much more handy there. So for me, having Lens as a starter over Quaresma down the road, something I prefer because he offers more in that regard. But I wouldn't be opposed to a Quaresma Lens partnership on the wings, because I do understand what Şenol Güneş wants. He wants one winger that's focusing mainly on crossing, and then he wants one guy moving off the ball and being able to score goals, which is Ryan Babel. And he's good at that. But I think that Jermaine Lens can also function in that role. Yes, he's more of a crosser nowadays, but at PSV he had that role for a long time, and he did that really well. The difference, of course, with Babel is that he's probably a better header. He's taller, and I think that's probably something that Şenol Güneş likes. Also, Şenol Güneş hasn't seen that side of Lens yet. Of the winger cutting in off the ball and scoring goals coming into the crosses. That's something he hasn't really seen of Lens yet. So, but I know he can do it.
That's why I think
I'm confident.
I think these coming weeks, while Quaresma's getting match fit, it's an opportunity for Lens still, if he hasn't yet proven it, which I think he should have personally, and I think you do too. he definitely, I think, needs to start flashing that capacity as well in these coming matches against Akhisar and LASK. I'm sure he'll probably still be in the starting lineup by then.
But when I say when he hasn't proven it yet, I don't mean that he hasn't proven his worth, because but I think that Channel Gunners sees him in the same role as he uses Quaresma. He sees him more in the winger is going to bring the cross rather than finish the play.
Yeah, for sure.
If you know what I mean. And I think that's something that Lens has not been able to show yet, because he's never been used in that role yet, or at least not for a full game or anything like that. I think he's always been kind of used as that alternative to Quaresma, and never as an alternative to Babel.
Well, let's move things along now. Let's try to briefly preview what's upcoming. So we have our next match only in a couple of days, which is a nice thing in this case. I think we all want to get back on the pitch and redeem things, or see some redemption. So on Sunday we're going to be playing Akhisar. Do you have any things of note? Any comments about what we're going to see here? Now they've performed in this last in the Super Cup, the season opener, and they performed admirably, beating Galatasaray in penalties. What do you think? They did, Galatasaray looked weak.
This is going to be. I suspect this is going to be a frustrating match. It's very important that we don't concede first. It's probably important that we don't concede at all, but very important that you don't concede first against a team like this.
In general, yeah.
We saw this last season, that they can be extremely frustrating in an away game for them. They were very frustrating for us last season. We got that early penalty. We missed that. Quaresma missed that, and Negredo missed the sitter rebound. And that ended up haunting us because we couldn't find the goal later on in the match. It's going to be very important for us to score relatively early here, I think. If we can get that first goal, I think we can. I think it's in the bag. Probably we can salvage that win. Yeah. But they're going to be frustrating for us, especially because we're nowhere near firing on all cylinders. We still have those gaping holes in our team, really. Plus, I don't even want to think about Tolga. I think it's going to be a very tough season opener, despite the fact that it's going to be in Vodafone Park. But it's a must-win match. We can't drop points here. I think if we start off on a rut, that's going to affect us completely adversely. We don't want to start off chasing. We have to those first 5 games before we play the Fenerbahce derby in week 6. Those are all must-win matches.
Sure. Just to preview their starting 11, which they featured against Galatasaray. They played in a kind of classic old-school 4-3-3. Up front, they had Selesnyov, who was their goal scorer and kind of came out with a little energy against Galatasaray. Barbosa and Elvis Manu. They have in the midfield Abdul Sissoko, Bilal Kisa, an old Super League sort of a traveler. A young kid named Aykut Çeviker. Is he young?
Like 23, 24,
Oh, no, look,
I think.
he's 28. Okay, he's not even young.
Oh, there you
so
go.
He's not so good. That's not something that's probably too much to worry about. They've got Danny Nunco, or I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I don't even want to talk that. My mouth feels dirty. Mustafa Yumlu, also in the middle of their defense. Umer Bayram on the left side of the defense. Versijavic,
Really
I guess some
back.
sort of Serbian right back. I'm not sure where he's from. A Bosnian, perhaps. Bosnian, yeah, he's Bosnian.
Yeah, he's good.
Nothing like that screams like, look out for me. I guess Miguel Lopez comes off their bench. I think he could be a starter. They've got Daniel Larsson as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, former Gaziantep. He's a good.
Swede.
He's very fast. Good, decent player. They have a good team, man. The goalkeeper probably depends who's going to play, whether it's Fatih or whether it's
Eray Ataseven.
Yeah, no, it's a tough team. Umar Bayram, good quality player. Versajevic is decent. Miguel Lopez, if he plays, definitely a quality player. And they have a decent central defensive duo. I mean, Danny F him, but he's good for these types of teams.
Sure, yeah.
He's fast and he's physically strong. Mustafa Yumlu, very strong in the air, physically strong as well. That Seleznov is a great striker. I think we've been fortunate that we haven't faced him too often because I believe he's missed our games quite frequently with injuries. But just ask any Galatasaray fan because he haunts them.
Yeah, apparently, yeah, he scored against them.
That's not the first goal he scored against them either. And I think he also kind of made Fenner his BITCH. Then.
You think you're going to avoid the censors like that?
Yeah. Elvis Manu, he's a quality player. Barbosa, I'm not sure about. Aiko Celiker is not great. But do they still have Custodio in their team, or did they?
I don't think so. I think he's
with him because he was a pretty decent player. So they're going to be a stubborn team to beat.
By the way, some background on Elder Barbosa is that he was I think he established himself.
Oh,
yeah, he established himself with Braga actually, so he's not lightweight.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was Helder Barbosa. Okay,
played for Ajax Athens for some time. He's not. He played for Porto, I think, but I know of him actually because little side note. I lived in Portugal for some time, but he's not bad. I mean, they're not a bad side. We definitely need to be on the lookout. We have to definitely bring our A game, so today's performance definitely doesn't give us much to feel good about.
I mean, we've seen how good they can be against top teams throughout the competition last year, and especially in the Cup. I mean, they knocked out Galatasaray in the semifinals in 2 legs, not just a lucky one win. No, they did it over 2 legs, and I believe they lost the home leg 1-2, and then they went and won on the road. I mean, okay, Galatasaray kind of played maybe a little bit of a B team, but still. And then they defeated Fenerbahce in the final. Now they defeated Galatasaray again in the Super Cup final. They got a point against us last season in Vodafone Park. 0-0 scoreless draw. They beat Fenerbahce on the road 2-3, I think. So, I mean, these guys are definitely not easy to beat. It's going to be tough. Yeah. And like I said already, we're not firing on all cylinders yet.
Yeah,
I think it's a lot easier to stop a team from playing football than it is playing good football.
Now on the flip side, are you expecting any changes to our lineup going into this match? Maybe are we going to see someone playing alongside Pepe that's not Nejip, for example?
Yes, maybe. Yeah, maybe Vida comes in if he's not sold.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Maybe Rocco, but I doubt that. I don't think he's going to just throw him in just like that. So maybe, but I think Nejip has done well enough to not be moved to the bench straight away. Although to me, I want to see 2 natural central backs as quick as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Apart from that, there's not really all that much you can change with what we have on the bench. I mean, you could put Negredo on instead of Laren, but if you still want to offload him, then you're not doing your striker that you want to keep any favors.
Yeah, and you probably don't want to risk him for injury in that event either.
Oh yeah, also a good point. So I don't really expect many changes. Maybe Adriano comes into the team because he missed today because
he was injured. So
he had a slight injury, so maybe he comes into the team. But I think that given Janner's performance in these European games, I know a lot of people have been slating his performance, but I think that in Šenolkić's eyes at least, he's done well. So I think that he's definitely staying at left back. So
everyone's got an agenda, you know what I mean? With Janner, Babel, people have feelings that they're bringing in that have little to do with what they're seeing on the pitch often, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, they prefer Ismail Koybashi, clearly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Adriano, if he comes into the team, it will probably be in midfield, actually. I could see him come in there. But I don't really expect any major changes come Sunday. Maybe Quaresma, but I wouldn't put my money on it.
I mean, I think that sounds about right to me.
I mean, I was right about the lineup today. I predicted that one right, 100%. And I'm doing this now because I have to apologize for making a mistake yesterday. I have to put out a rectification later during the transfer segment.
So yeah, let's move on to the speaking of the transfer segment. I suppose there's really not much else to say about Akisar that we haven't said. And there's not much to say during the transfer segment, except for, of course, the headliner, which I would even venture a guess that most people are here for, since I doubt they're too psyched about what they say on the pitch. But although maybe they do want to process some of those thoughts. But we have some news on the transfer wire, don't we, Kaan?
Well, yes, but still no done deal. I just want to point that out. So that's what you're expecting here. No done deals yet, no.
So the talk of the town is that David Ospina has agreed to personal terms with Beşiktaş. So that at least, it sates those who wondered whether or not he wanted to come to Beşiktaş. It sounds like that is something he's open to, and that they may have agreed to terms. That, however, does not mean that the transfer is done, because they haven't agreed with Arsenal yet. So we don't have any details, do we?
No, I mean, I think there was never a question whether Ospina wanted to come to Beşiktaş. I think the signs were always clear that he was definitely open to that move. I mean, he's been being courted by Beşiktaş for 6 years. He was keen on the move when he was at Nice, and there's been several points in time where he was at Arsenal and we were interested in, and he was definitely showing that he would be open to the move. But I think the problem has always been financial, getting a deal with Arsenal, but also now at this point, I think, you have to keep in mind, we basically, in part, sold Fabri because he wanted a bump in pay. Mm-hmm. He was on 1.2 million a year, and he wanted a bump in pay over 2 million. I mean, I think he deserved. This is documented already. I think we discussed that we both agree that Fabri, given his performances the past 2 years, had deserved a bump in pay. But given the position of the club right now, giving him a 2 million plus contract, given the financial situation of the club, that wasn't prudent. So the problem with Ospina, and we discussed this as well when we spoke about him a few weeks ago, the problem with him was his contract, that he's making too much money at Arsenal. So I wouldn't say that because Sky Sports reported this, and they're usually very much on the money when it comes to this kind of stuff. Because I always like to say that the English media is equal to the Turkish media. It's so full of BS, and you don't know who to trust. But Sky Sports is one of very few extremely reliable sources. So when they say there's a personal agreement there, that's pretty big news. And it also indicates that financially there's no more obstacle there in regards to Ospina's wages. So to me, that's pretty big news. So now it's just going to come down to Beşiktaş probably want to start off with a loan for Ospina, because they don't want to, in their final financial fair play year, fork out a big transfer fee, relatively big transfer fee. Let's say it's the Arsenal will probably want around 5 million.
I think that's the
5
rumor,
million or something like that. So Beşiktaş probably don't want to fork that out right now, because I have explained before, I think that we still have to meet that break-even requirement. So that's probably just a big obstacle right now, that Arsenal don't want to agree to a loan perhaps. But I think at the end of the day, Arsenal are also going to want to clear a little bit of their own wage bill, and Ospina is kind of surplus right now there. So hopefully they'll be willing to work out a deal and let him go on loan initially, and then with a buyout clause or something.
Yeah.
Well, it has to be with a buyout clause.
Yeah.
Or even an obligation to buy, perhaps if he plays like 25 games or something.
An appearance clause or something. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. You're right, and I think that's the main hurdle is probably the salary. And so if they've gotten past that, hey, the one thing we can say is that we're definitely not going to get Harun Tekin. So that's like the podcast nightmare.
Well, supposedly this kind of got this move kind of got like sped up a little bit because Bursa weren't moving enough on the asking price for Harun-Tekin, and Beşiktaş kind of decided like,
That's
look,
it.
for that money we might as well go for Ospina, and that's why they shifted gears a little bit.
Really, because it's 1.5 million more, let's say theoretically, for Ospina rather than Harun-Tekin. That's very much worth it, correct? Like.
Look, I mean, Ospina is a goalkeeper that has played at 2 World Cups right now. Has played every match for Colombia at 2 World Cups, Copa America, Champions League, Europa League. He's played Premier League. You cannot compare that with Harun-Tekin. They're the same age. They're both 29 years old. I mean, if Harun-Tekin was 26 or something, there's a difference, but they're both the same age. And if you have to compare what both of them have achieved in their careers, their status, I don't think you can warrant paying 3.5 million for Harun-Tekin if you're not willing to pay that for.
That should really be a form of comedy, like the Turkish transfer comedy, where like you think that a guy like Harun-Tekin would be worth just like about $1 million or so less than a guy like David Ospina. Yeah, okay.
I mean, we let Fabri go for 6 million.
Yeah. Which is also, I think, like a little low given his progress with the club, but
Yeah, maybe I think I said that something around 7 or 8 would have probably been more accurate for him. But we got 6 for him. Then you cannot, in my opinion, expect to get 5 for Harun. And supposedly they kind of lowered their price to 3.5 now. But to me, I get that. It's for Bursaspor. He's an important player. He's their first goalkeeper, and 3.5 million. That is a good fee, but that's not extravagant. I think that's a fair price from their perspective. I also think that from our perspective, that's still too much.
Yeah, it's way too much.
So I mean, the valuation of a player for their current club can be higher than it is for a club that wants to buy him. That doesn't mean the player isn't worth that fee, but maybe it's just not worth it for that particular club that is interested. It doesn't mean that player is not worth that fee. But to me, Harun-Tekin is not worth 3.5 million for Beşiktaş. I think for Bursaspor he definitely is, because he's an important player for them. But I can't see him be that important for us. I think that a player like Ospina is going to have a bigger chance at succeeding. And I think that Ospina is going to have similar success to Fabri if we do end up getting him.
Yeah.
And now I would like to put out my rectification I promised earlier.
Yes, let's hear it.
Yeah. So in yesterday's podcast we were talking about transfers as well, and we were talking about Haber 1903's exclusive, where Murat Özen wrote that Beşiktaş were not in London to sell, but they were there to buy. That was all right. And then he also wrote that we were there for Ospina and one other player, but I said that he did not specify that it was a player from the same club, so that it was an Arsenal player, but he actually did specify that both players were from Arsenal. So I said it's probably Nasser Chadli or something. So no, that's according to that information not going to be Chadli because he plays for West Brom. So I just wanted to rectify that because I kind of felt stupid after reading the article again today.
Oops.
And I mean,
correction. It happens.
Sorry.
It happens.
So, yeah. I do want to rectify it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy that's not willing to admit he made a mistake.
Yeah, it takes a big man to admit the error of his ways. But so,
I would like to touch a little bit more on Nasser Chadli. This is just for me personally, and from the feeling I've been getting from this. For me, today was a very important day in that transfer dossier, so to speak. For me, the biggest fear, I would call it a fear. The biggest fear for us, for our chances to get Nasser Chadli, were if on a deadline day, a Premier League club that are desperate for a player in his position would come in with a late swoop. Because you see that very often the Premier League clubs leave it late, and they leave it until deadline day to make some big moves. So for me, that option, that's clearly off the table now. So I think our chances, because we supposedly, according to all relatively reliable reports, we have had a principal agreement with the player for like over a week, and it's just still coming down to the final details with West Brom. Now, so the only thing that I think I could endanger that is a club coming in with a better offer than what we're offering, of course. Because I mean, if a club are willing to offer cash and straight up purchase, then West Brom are going to be far less likely to agree with our terms to loan him and then with a buyout clause or something along those lines. So I think the chances of that have diminished now. I think a Premier League club was far more likely to come and put up an interesting offer on the table. There's some rumors that AC Milan are interested, but I wouldn't be too afraid of that. I think that Nasser Chadli and I feel at this point I feel relatively comfortable in saying that I'm not going to say it's 100%, but I feel good that in our chances that to sign him. So if we can sign Ospina and Chadli in the foreseeable future, I don't want to put any time frame on that. Yeah,
no guarantees.
I hope
let's knock on wood.
I hope they finish at least one of those transfers in the next week, but I don't know at this pace. Very frustrating transfer window. But if we if we can land those two guys, and then hopefully sell off Negredo or let him go on a free, but just get rid of those wages and then bring in the striker, I think then we can still say we had a decent transfer window. I mean, we don't really need much more than that. Yes, we could use a right back. But we can still loan one in towards deadline day. That's still perfectly possible. I don't think that's a top priority right now, and I think it's very realistic that we can still loan in a right back at around deadline day. For example, Wagu from that just signed for Barcelona. I think he'll probably be loaned out. I could see us loaning him towards the end of the transfer window.
Well, I mean, let's hope so. Like this whole window. It has been a test of our patience, and so it's winding down again. Like now we're down to the.
Don't forget we signed. I think we loaned Anderson Talisca 5 days before the end of the transfer window.
That's right.
We loaned Abubakar like 2 days before. Then we signed both Medel and Caner Erkin, I think, on the deadline day.
So let's remind everyone what is the deadline day this season?
The 31st of August.
The 31st of August.
About 3 weeks.
So for at least 3 weeks, you're going to be getting more transfer rumors from us, likely.
For three more weeks, you're going to have to hear to the transfer window is not over. Damn it!
That's
this
right.
isn't over.
Don't give up yet.
We can still sign players.
That's right. Well, guys, let's cross our fingers that something does materialize sooner rather than later. But in the meanwhile, stay tuned. We'll be back for more. Sunday, we're meeting Akhisar. So over here in the Eastern Standard Time in New York City, the game is on at 2:45 p.m. So it's just after lunch. You can have your beer and enjoy the game. Perfect timing for me on a Sunday. How are you doing, Kaan? What time is it over there?
Well, for people in Central Europe, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Spain, France, whatever. For us, it's going to be at 8:45 p.m., so 20:45 or whatever. So evening. For people in the UK, it's obviously going to be 19:45, and for people in Turkey, it's going to be 21:45. So pretty late match for people in Turkey. But fortunately, we're playing at Vodafone Park and no longer at Olympiad, so still enough time to get home.
Yeah, you go. That's good news for those of us in the United States. We can have some nice time with our family in the morning and watch the game in the afternoon. That's right. But so on that note, let's close things out. We'll be back shortly after that game, perhaps even the day of that game or that evening, I suppose, or the next morning, however the post-production works on it. But send us out. Let's do it. Let's go old school, Kaan.
For sure, you can follow our account on Twitter at Beşiktaş_int. You can follow the podcast at Eagles_podcast. You can follow Sinan at Sir_right_a lot. And you can follow myself, Kaan Bayazit, at Razerian, RAZZERIAN.
And on that note, let's go Beşiktaş, everyone. See ya.